maybe with a really obvious place, which is the text. And the text in relation to the music. And my question for both of you, which is kind of similar and a little bit different, is David, I'm wondering where you started with the text. Like, what came first? Was it the music or the text? Did it come together? And how did one define the other? And Lucinda, I'm so curious, as you were developing it choreographically, did the text also function as a piece of music to you? Was it rhythmic? Like, how did it inform how the music would happen? Because it's such an integral part of the whole thing.
Well, I guess I'll just start with the text. You know, sometimes when you're writing a piece of music, you want to make something that's about yourself, and you spend the whole time investigating yourself. And sometimes I find when I'm writing a piece of music, I want to know what happens to everybody else, you know, what's going on in the world. So when I want to know what's going in the world, I do what we always do, which is spend endless hours fiddling around on the internet. And so I find that if you ask the right question to the internet, if you ask the wrong question, you're on a Russian porn site and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you ask the right question, you know, it takes a huge amount of effort to figure it out, then you actually learn something about the lives of people all around the world. Because people reveal themselves on the internet in ways that, for some reason, is much more uninhibited than they would ever reveal themselves to their friends or neighbors. So I just wondered, what's the most important thing that happened to everyone in the world? What is the most important thing? You know, if you imagine at the end of your life, theoretically you're supposed to, you know, have your life flash, you know, before your eyes, and some great moment from your life stands out as being more important than any other moment. What would that moment be for all of us? So I figured out, you know, after much trial and error, if I asked the question, I remember the day that and then my search engine auto-completed that sentence. Then I took out all the Russian pornography, and I took out all the answers which were, you know, nasty or about products or trying to sell you something. And this is what we were left with. And then I alphabetized the answers that I could use, because I really just wanted it to be a catalog. I didn't want it to be as if one was more important. The banal things that you remember are just as important as the really heavy things.
And did the musical structure, or did the musical composition come first and then the text came second, or how did that work as you were composing it?
No, the text came first. I had to think of a kind of music that would be open enough so that all the text could be laid right across it.
Right. And while we're paused, give a welcome to my So we're talking about what came first, the music and the text, and how that happened. And then we're just about to hear from Lucinda in terms of structuring a choreographic arc across music and text, and how that played out in the process, and how the text kind of figured into that as a piece of music.
Well, I was fascinated with the imagery and the fact that there was such a range of some serious things and some things that were not necessarily so serious. But I got stuck in the A's I achieved my first engineering drawing, and I think the first whole half of the piece, I was fascinated with the lines in space, and that whole, the imagery of the lines getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that really dominates, practically for me, the main image that I use from the text. Of course, there are other images as well, but that was the main one. And everything that comes from the movement is in some ways related to some of the text, but not all of it.
I'm wondering, and for all of you, so two of you had a relationship to this music before two of you were added to the process. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, each of you, how your relationship to it changed. And especially you, Maya, I'm wondering if you could chat a little bit about if you felt that you had to unlearn some things that you already knew about it. And David, I'm fascinated as to whether or not you felt the urge to redo or revise once other elements got added in that were not there from the beginning, and how you kind of wrestled with that.
Do you want Maya to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, David, did you feel the urge to? I don't know how much you said because I didn't hear what you were saying before.
Not much.
But David and I, the second part of the piece, which is World to Come, was a piece that David composed for me in 2001. And so I've played this piece for many years now. And in 2016, I think we were in Vermont or somewhere, and we were doing something together, and I said to David, why don't we do a prequel to World to Come? And then that's kind of how this whole thing came about. It was never meant to be more than the music initially. But when we recorded the piece 2 years ago, I just kept seeing these images of a dancer, and I thought it would be really great to work with Wendy, who I met a few years earlier. So I called her, and then we called Lucinda, and that's kind of how the whole thing came about. But when we started to work, to answer your question, I didn't feel that I needed to unlearn anything, but I did discover a lot of new ways in which the piece exists. So definitely the choreography and working together in the studio, we were together in the first time for 2 weeks, definitely informed everything. And I also made the decision to memorize the piece, which I never done before, but I decided I needed to memorize it. So that was internalizing it that way and connecting it with Wendy definitely changed the way I perceived the piece and some of the phrasing.
And that you could memorize this piece is really unbelievable. Just as you, I'm sure, could hear, there's a lot of repetition, but I very slyly made it so that no two measures are exactly alike. So it sounds incredibly familiar to you, but it's really maddening for her.
I'm counting like crazy. 6s and 5s and 7s and yeah. And of course, as you can hear, there are a lot of other cello tracks that kind of build, and so there's no room for error really, because you have to be together with everything else that kind of transforms.
Did you feel the urge to revise?
Oh, I didn't feel any urge at all. To me, I think it's really interesting as a composer because you have to decide how you offer it to the world. You know, especially for a composer like me who depends on really great performers, you're already in the process of collaboration just to make your work. So you already have accepted the idea that someone else is going to be taking what you do.
Right.
And is going to be interpreting it and pushing it in a different direction. And so, to me, I think it's really interesting to make it possible that a piece may have lots of different ways of being interpreted and lots of ways in. So one of the things I love about seeing my music dance, especially this dance, is that I notice things about the structure of it that I didn't notice before.
Right.
But I would never want to recompose anything to take advantage of that. To me, it's just so exciting to sort of hear someone hear it in front of me.
Which actually brings me to a question, and then I'll open it up. So Wendy and Lucinda, one of the things that was so striking to me in seeing it, and I saw it without tech and with tech, so it's so interesting to see the form of it in both ways. And one of the things that's so striking is the negotiation of space. Not only the space that Maya inhabits and Wendy inhabits, and how we have them in our visual field, but how they have each other in their visual field, how they see each other, and how that changes from the first half to the second half. And I'm wondering if you guys could talk about how that process evolved for you in the studio, and how did it come about? That's a maybe a little
Well,
jumping on
I love the idea that they were both occupying the space and that they could share it in equal, sort of exchange different sides of the space. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to have happen.
Day one, Lucinda knew that we would have levels. So we started with a piano bench, that was our ramp. And she knew she wanted us both on different levels, but then to switch that. So I feel very different from the first to the second. I feel the real arc of the sort of the story, this person's life almost, growing up. And then ascending and kind of looking back and being almost down and seeking what it was. So I don't know, that's kind of evolved over time. This piece, since we've started doing it in July, Jacob's Pillow has blossomed so much. It feels like it's really just taking us on a ride that we're not really in control of it at the moment. It's kind of taking us. Good.
That's why you should all come back tomorrow.
It's going to be different.
thoughts, questions? Anybody? Yeah.
I have a very simple question, actually. Hi, thank you so much. I have a very simple question just about the imagery. I just want to know what studio this photograph was taken in. Because it just, the most beautiful part of the piece is just how familiar everything is, and like David, like you were talking about how every single moment and every single piece of text, every line of text, I'm sure everybody in the audience related more specifically to certain lines than others. Like, I realized I was no longer depressed. I got up, I started, I went, and so I was just imagining the entire audience buzzing with everyone just kind of owning a different line. And then I was thinking, well, where are we, in space? So that's my question.
So the first image that you see, the room, Lucinda and I were talking a lot about sort of how to put what is the space that the piece begins, and we came to this idea of an abandoned space and windows, that you see windows as sort of, and I shot a video film at this place in Patterson, New Jersey, and literally in the middle of the Jersey. Yeah, but it's an incredible place called the Art Factory, which is a converted, big factory and we just went there and found this place. It was kind of serendipitous, and we shot there, and that's.
Others? Thoughts? Questions? I have one. How did the props evolve?
Well, Lucinda brought a brown bag in one day, and she started pulling out ropes and scarves and handmade bags for materials. And she just brought these things and said, we're going to make something out of this. Put this on. Try this. And it was just fascinating that the brown bag made this whole thing happen, sort of. She's just a genius.
Anybody else? Yep, coming.
Hi. Thinking back to other pieces that have been written about 9/11, David, I seem to remember your voice coming through in Steve Reich's piece about 9/11, that you're speaking about walking your kids to school or something on that day. And I just wondered if any of Steve is woven into your piece at all.
Yeah, he wrote that piece after this piece.
Ah.
Yeah, so
Never mind.
So I think I'm entitled to 5%
Yeah,
of whatever.
right. Actually, he called us, or he called me at least, and he said, "Do you mind if I call the piece WTC, which is the original name of this piece?" So he profusely apologized, and that's why he has David in this piece and my voice. I'm singing in Steve's piece as well, and I think that was his way of repaying us.
Anybody else? I got another if no one else has. Wendy, can you talk a moment about the process of learning the choreography? We were in a class a couple of days ago, and you surprised me by talking about what is set and what is not, and what is improvised and what is not. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk about how that developed a little bit.
Well, Lucinda gave me parameters but no rules. So she gave me these prompts and she gave me an order of things, and I listened for text to know when to move on to the next series of movements. We designed a lot of the ideas together. She liked things and let's not do that. And so I build on what she approved of, pretty much. I hope so. That's the first half is mostly improvised for the first half hour. And then the second half is not improvised too much. Yeah.
And do you find that as you do it more, that you improvise more, or that you improvise less and go to what you've set that you think is successful?
I have points of connection where I want to be in a certain place at a certain time doing something. That's just for myself to look for and hold on to and go to. It gives me like points of reference. I think by the end of next week, when we're in the Joyce for 8 shows, we'll see what happens. I think that will be fun to play. I like doing this over and over and feeling the evolution of it.
Yeah, I'm coming. While I'm walking over there, you know, it's a while since 9/11 has happened, and whole generations have come into our culture who were not around when it happened. We did a matinee yesterday morning for about 200 high school students from LAUSD who had much kind of talking amongst themselves when you guys were talking about 9/11. And I'm wondering, especially for Maya and for you, David, how it's changed for you, if at all, sort of as history moves on and as our culture moves on, how it's resonant for you now in different ways, if at all, than it was when you first started working on it? David, why don't you?
I know that's a really good question. It's something that I think, I actually, my children's school was next door to the World Trade Center. And so at that morning, I had 2 little children in each hand when the first plane went over our head, and it was so low, everyone, hit the deck because it really was like terrifying, right? And so, the people who were there's certain things that you will never forget. You never forget the dust and the smell and the terror and the running around and I think something that sort of got into this piece. I didn't really want to make a memorial that. I wasn't really trying to do what Steve was trying to do, actually, by saying, here's this moment and let's remember it. But, to me, the most powerful thing was so many people couldn't be found. And so every place where there was a place, normally you would put a poster to advertise a product, and every one of those places was, full of Xerox, a bunch of Xerox photographs of people going, have you seen my husband? Have you seen my children? And to me, that's the memory that is still the most powerful. It's just sort of, there were these, makeshift shrines that showed up at Union Square with thousands of people's photographs. And people would just walk through them, in shock. So this piece wasn't really meant to be, let's remember that moment, or let's fight terror, or let's, be humble, or let's do these things. It was just sort of like, World to Come really came out of the recognition that morning all those people were here, and then where'd they go?
Yeah.
What happened to them? What journey are they on now? And how does that relate to the journey that we will all go on? So it wasn't really trying to be about that moment.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I think that probably didn't answer your question, but
No, it did. Totally did. What's your question?
I hadn't read the program before the show. I just wanted to experience it. Very enlightening what you're saying about it. I had felt, though, while while watching it, that clearly two separate movements, so to speak. The first one very restricted with the props, the second one very liberated. I was curious as a composer, as a choreographer, as a musician, and a dancer, how you interpreted that. Because for me, just watching it, clearly there were these two distinct restricted part, then this incredibly liberating, freeing part. Could you address that?
Well, I feel that the two sections are very, very distinct, partly because of the text. The second section, or what we perform, the world to come, there are many aspects of it that are abstract. The diminishing figure of the 7 to the 6 to the 5 to the 4 is something that I really love to work with, and developed a lot of material really following that, even though, of course, every time you hear that it's different. But the first part, because of the text, I really gravitated into a sense of wanting to work with imagery with Wendy, and the fact that both performers are together on stage, to find a way to connect them, as if there's some kind of dialogue between them, which I think is really part of what the whole piece is about for me, is the coexistence of these two performers, and the fact that Wendy can have some range and work around Maya and work, in different ways with the music, and Maya is always very stable in her element as a musician. But I think of them as two performers, and the fact that these sections being so different enabled me to work in that way.
Musically, there are a lot of connections actually between the two parts. The melodic material is the same. It's contextualized in a different way. But there are those other elements that come in towards the second part of the first part, which connects to World to Come. So for me, there are a lot of musical connections, but again, it's all has a different context. The arc of the first part is a lot longer and a lot slower, and so much of it is about patience. When you perform, it's just because it evolves so slowly, and there's this, meditative text, which, I recorded the text, but of course I don't speak it live, it's pre-recorded. But it's, it's about building those long, kind of soundscapes and melodic thing. I think one of the first things I remember David was telling me is that he wanted to create this melody that it's like life, which is, it never, it constantly changes a little bit, but it's made from the same few notes. And, so it's a different kind of challenge. It's not, actually the first part is not hard to play per se, it's pretty simple melodic material, but it's about building this long thing, and it's about sort of being in that zone of like being very, very patient and sort of taking it all in as we play.
I'm going to take us off by sharing a little story which I have not told you two yet. So yesterday we had about 200 high school students here from about 4 LAUSD public schools, and some of them were dance students and some of them musicians, and about 50 of them were studying drawing, and they brought their art books and their crayons and pencils, and they sketched as these guys did the last half of the performance. And they didn't do it in any costumes or work light. It was kind of an invited rehearsal, and in some ways it was actually even more intimate than it is to kind of do it all under light. And during that question and answer session, one of the young women who was one of the art students said, I really liked it, but I don't know that I understood what was happening. I don't think that I got it. And these guys were gritting. They said, no, you did. You really did get it. There's nothing to get. What you felt and what you got it. And what I didn't share with you guys is that what she drew on her paper was a beautiful bird. And the bird had these wings that were extended like that. And I would say she got it. Thank you all so much for being here.